Doesn't matter.
Not a WhatsApp group.
Right? A WhatsApp group, right. A WhatsApp group, right. Right, I have that listed as okay. Now, the person who worked in this field was called Tajfel. Tajfel was a psychologist who set up the concept of in-group and out-group. Okay, maybe some of you have heard these terms used before. What's an in-group? The in-group are the people that have something in common. And remember, they may not have a leader. Okay? In Israel today, we have several elections already. We don't technically have a leader. We have somebody who's sort of acting as a leader, but there's no real prime minister right now. But everybody in the country still would say they're Israeli. Okay, that's their group. Tajfel says that a person is made up, a person's identity is made up by his own abilities, skills, knowledge, experience, etc., and the group that he belongs to. Everyone belongs to a group. Even if you think you don't, that's the group you belong to. You belong to the out group, the group that's the homeless people.
The non-vegan.
Right. The homeless people in, in San Francisco, right? All these pictures of homeless people. In a sense, they're a group. I don't know if they know each other, okay? Interesting to study that. Do they talk to each other? Do they? Okay. So there's a group. Tajfel says there are three characteristics of a group. One is we categorize ourselves, okay? We feel that we are, let's say, vegans, okay? We're vegans. That's a group. Okay? And then there are the non-vegans. So in order to categorize yourself, you have to say where you belong and where you don't belong. We identify, he says, with the group. What does that mean? We want them to win. We want them to be the best. We want vegans to live longer than non-vegans. Not that we are bad people and don't want non-vegans to have a long life. But if you're a vegan group and you've identified with it, you say to yourself, wow, it's so great to be a vegan because I'm going to live longer, okay? For whatever reason, I have a granddaughter who's a vegan. And she's really a crazy vegan in the sense that she doesn't eat eggs, even, the craziest things. And she tells me because it comes from life. And okay, I don't want to get into it, but we have a lot of discussions about it. I say, you're missing a hamburger with ketchup dripping down, It's so hard to understand. Okay. Also, according to Tajfel, we constantly compare each other. Okay? In other words, within the group. Within the group, as we'll talk about towards the end, the last 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about religion. I can speak for the Jewish religion, but you tell me if it's true in Catholics and Protestants, that many Jews say, I'm more religious, I'm a better Jew. In other words, they're all Jews, okay? The Jews who are Jews. Pardon?
We have a phrase for a set phrase, holier than that.
Holier than that, excellent. Excellent. Right, that's exactly the concept. And it could be even for those who aren't religious. In other words, a non-religious person may very well say, a non-religious Jew may say, I'm a better Jew. Why? Because I work all day, I don't steal, or whatever. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get into conflicts with Jew. That's fascinating. When a group does things that aren't nice, we'll talk about that. Okay. Now, one of the things that Tajfel sort of started, though he didn't do the research on this, is what's called a stereotype threat. Let me explain what this is. All groups have some stereotype, okay? For instance, I took a few examples from an article. These are the examples in the article. All Jews are wealthy and greedy. Okay? Women are not good in science. African Americans are good athletes. Politicians and lawyers only care about themselves. All Germans are punctual. Okay? Now what happens, and this is where the whole concept of stereotype comes in. Let's say you're a German and you come late all the time.
It happens sometimes.
It happens sometimes.
Been in Israel too long.
Right, okay. When I gave this example, what you're just saying now, if a meeting is called, let's say, in the Department of Psychology, just tell you how funny we were, how it is. A meeting is called at 10 a.m. At 10 a.m., the only person at the meeting is the chairman of the department. When I was chairman, I had to be there, and his assistant, his or her, sometimes a female was a chairman, the assistant. And what one of the previous chairmen did, which was brilliant, one of the most brilliant ideas I ever heard of, nobody was there except him and the secretary. And he would tell the secretary the different assignments that everyone in the department had to do. Okay? You will be responsible for the conference in the department. The person wasn't there. When he came in to the meeting, too late, I'm sorry, you were appointed, there was no objection. It was brilliant. It had an effect.
It's called Pe'echad, but it's only in Hebrew.
Right. Pe'echad meaning unanimous. In this case, unanimity, one person, the chairman. Okay? Again, the stereotype thread happens in so many cases. Okay, there are Jews who aren't wealthy. There are African Americans who aren't great athletes, right? This happens. How do you deal with it? And you're a member of the group, and everybody calls you. Each one of you are better thinking about different stereotypes that relate in your life, and you may not be that stereotype. You may not be the wealthy, the athlete, or whatever. How do you deal with the fact that you're different than the group? Okay? One of the things that has been noted here is in some cases you could change your group identification. In other words, let's say if you're a German and you're supposed to come on time, you could say, well, I married a French woman, okay, and she doesn't come on time, and I'm part of that group now, the French larger group or something like that. In other words, you may need to change your identity, who you belong to. Okay. Now comes another area which was before Touchfell. Unfortunately, an area that has some negative consequences, prejudice. Okay, it existed before Touchfell, but once Touchfell talked, it became very, very popular to work with groups in the area of prejudice. Okay, what does prejudice mean? Prejudice means that I think the other group, the out group, they're just not as good as us, okay? And whatever it is, you name it, and you name the subject, what the group is identified with, you guys out there are just not as good. Now, I did several studies in this area, was very interesting. I think interesting, okay? How do I convince somebody else to do something? Let's take the case, we did this study, one of my students, a husband and wife. And, in Israel, as I'm sure in the Western world it's not always husband and wife, it's two people living together, may even be of the same gender, okay? How does one convince the other to do something, okay? So there are two major areas here. A fellow named Bert Raven, he's from UCLA, and I and another fellow named Joe Schwartzwald, we wrote a lot of papers on this. How do you convince? How does a husband convince a wife? Now listen to this. What?
Blackmail.
Okay, you're not far from the truth. Listen. The wife, let's say they want to buy a refrigerator and they want to buy a car. What does the wife do? And this is, we did the study, maybe things have changed in the last 10, 15 years, but
Nice.
let's say, okay.
My wife goes out and buys a car.
Your wife buys the car.
She just,
Okay,
she doesn't even ask me.
it doesn't ask, okay. She's asking close, she's behaving close to what we found for the mail. Listen to this. If the refrigerator, this is what we did, and we asked this of couples, refrigerator and a car. The woman, okay, brings data. In other words, she says, this refrigerator, okay, uses less energy. Okay, it'll save us money. The freezer is on the top, and I like it on the top rather than on the bottom. Okay, she brings data. The man, when they want to buy a car, what does he say? I want a Toyota. And she'll say, why? I want a Toyota. Okay? In other words, he uses what's called in the literature coercive power. In other words, I want a Toyota. Okay, what does it matter? Why? You know? Whereas the woman in this, I think, comes out much better. Okay? She'll more readily provide data on the subject. Okay? So what did we find? It's very interesting. We found that if you're dealing with somebody in your in-group, you bring data. You use what's called soft power. You try to convince the person, you know, let's, I don't know, give me a topic. Let's say Israel wants to, I don't know, build some electric station or whatever. They'll bring data indicating to the Israelis and to the people outside of Israel. They say, I don't care. We're building, why do I have to tell you why we're doing it, okay? In other words, in the group, you use soft, you explain. To the out group, you're much more likely to show, I'm the boss, that's my property, it's my land, whatever. That's what I want. Okay. Leaders, there are two types of leaders, and this is research in another area. One is called transformational, and one is called transactional. What's the difference? A transactional leader, and it's very relevant to how you convince people, a transactional leader says we're doing something because I'm the leader, I want to do it. A transformational leader, just the word transformation, he wants you or she or he as the leader, wants you to accept their viewpoint, wants you to understand why they're doing it. And transformational leaders are much more effective. In Israel, one of the great transformational leaders in my mind was Menachem Begin. He was a person who people knew that he was doing it, the way I see it at least, because he believed in that a particular value, and people accepted the value that he presented. Now let's talk a little bit about religion. Okay? Is a religion a group? Yes, for sure. Is it a team? Maybe in your local community, in your local church, synagogue, whatever, mosque, whatever, it might be a team, right? There's a head person. My synagogue, for instance, on purpose, we don't have a head, okay? A rabbi. Why? Because there are like 10 rabbis in the synagogue, and nobody wants to give up his power. So they all, you know, they often don't agree. But you could argue that your synagogue, etc. But in general, you know, I don't know 99.4% of the people in Israel. Okay? So, and we don't even communicate. So I communicate with, I don't know, 200 people over a year, 300 people. How many do I? So I'm not really a team, but we're a group. Okay? Now, what is interesting about religion as a group? Religion has basically two components. One is my belief. I believe in a God. I believe in whatever, Trinity, whatever my concept is of religion. That's one. And two, it goes with certain behaviors. Okay? In other words, a religious person who identifies with the religion, he also behaves in a certain way. Okay, you go to prayers every day, 3 times a day, 7 times. Ritual, right? You wash before you eat. Very good. Very good. Excellent. You observed. So there are a lot of behaviors. There's one behavior that I like very much, which I think is really true of religious people. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Hebrew word chesed. What does that mean? That I think religious people, in general, grace, try to, what? Charity, helping others without expectation for reward. I help others because I want to. And now it could very well be that your religious belief, says, part of that says, helping others, that God put us here on earth to listen to Him, but also to communicate to others, to make others feel good, to help them. One of the areas which I work on also in organizations, there's something called organizational citizenship behavior. What is that? Organizational citizenship behavior refers to helping somebody in an organization without expectation for reward. Okay? When do you do this? Somebody doesn't understand how to work the computer. So you sit with him and do it. Interesting. What? Kidney. Oh, right. I've done several studies on who donates kidneys. Okay? Which is a very, very charitable act. And I'm doing it for anonymous kidney donors. In other words, not to give it to your brother, father, uncle, sister, whatever, but to give it anonymously. What?
To the system.
To the system. Okay?
The numbers are very important.
Yeah.
90% of those who do it are religious.
Right. Kidney donors in Israel, I don't know what the data is in the States, the majority are religious people. In other words, part of being religious is a belief, but also their behaviors that go with it. And I think that's what makes us distinguished, all of us in religion. Okay? Now listen to this. Okay? These are studies, recent studies. Religious people are more likely to stop smoking when the doctor tells them it's no good. Anybody here want to testify to that? Okay. Now, okay. Women, okay, for the women here, women who are religious, this is recent research that I'm quoting you, are more likely to do mammographies. Religious men and women are more likely to do colonoscopies.
It's a serious research.
Yeah. What? Yeah,
It's a
serious. Yeah, done on hundreds and hundreds of people on all of these behaviors: smoking, mammography, and colonoscopy. That religious people are more likely to do this. Okay? Why? What?
The tests of the
Oh yeah, to see if there's any genetic disease that might be present. Right. So that I don't wasn't in this data. Okay, unfortunately, and this is true, I think, in the Jewish religion as well as in the other religions, older people are more likely. All of these things that I said, to stop smoking, mammography, colonoscopies, always done by more older people. The younger people, religious identity, and research done in the United States, is decreasing. In other words, the behaviors that are associated with being in the religious group are decreasing. Going to a synagogue, going to, I assume, church. Maybe you have data on that too.
Yeah.
The younger
It's a new
people,
view study.
yeah, younger people are less interested in these behaviors. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a statistic you're not going to believe. Okay, because now I want to talk about two groups, which maybe all of you found.
Can we move on? You didn't tell us why religious are more likely to do the
Oh,
best.
okay.
Did you
Oh,
say
very
that?
good. Yes. No, I didn't say it,
Oh, okay.
and I'll tell you what he found.
But the research is just numbers.
What? Yeah. He did. It wasn't an experiment or anything. It was numbers of people. He argued like this: that a person who's religious and is going to a doctor views the doctor as an authority, as somebody who knows and is telling you what you should do. Okay. Whereas others will say, okay, he gave me advice, if I stop smoking, I'm going to be nervous or whatever. In other words, you don't see it as coming maybe good advice. All of these are good advice. To do mammography, colonoscopy, who could be against that,
That means you believe in authority.
Yeah, right. Now listen to
Just
this.
to understand, Meni.
Sure.
Religious means these people were asked, are you religious?
Yes,
or no?
yes, and they were asked on religious behavior.
Okay.
Not
so
only.
was their self-estimation, I am.
No, and behavior.
And behavior. Okay.
Behavior. Very important. And that's when you do these studies that I like to quote on religion in particular, behaviors count more than, a non-religious person might even say, I'm religious compared to my neighbor who's, does this or that, We'll get into it in a minute. Let's take an interesting concept, okay, and how you deal with this. I belong to a religious group, and I'm also a scientist. What will happen to that type of person? And many of you fall probably into that category. Scientist meaning somebody who looks up data, wants to know what's going on, etc. Often there's conflict. Okay? The world, according to Jewish tradition, is 5,780 years old. But there's no scientist in any laboratory or in any any place I can imagine would say that. He would say it's 1 billion, 2 billion, 1.8 billion, whatever number, based on his data, based on his analysis of fossils, whatever it is that leads you to that conclusion. What do you do when you belong to that? I want to take this as an example. What do you do as a religious person who also is a scientist? How do you deal? Now listen to this
You're talking about
statistic.
behavior.
Yeah. But listen to this statistic. In the general population of the United States, only 6% say they're atheists. Atheists, okay? Doesn't mean the other 94% go to church or synagogue. No, they believe there's a God, but I do my own thing. But among scientists, 64% of scientists say they're atheists. And on one level I can understand, right? Because the scientist is constantly coming up with issues that conflict religion. How do you deal with that? And that's what I want to spend a few minutes on. In other words, a scientist says to himself, I have data. I'll give you an example, okay? And the rabbi can correct me. In Jewish tradition, medical tradition, a baby born in the 8th month is not so good.
It's not viable.
Right. Whereas, right? But science today says 8 months is better than 7 months. It's clear. There's no argument in science on that issue. Okay? And there are many different issues of that where science has shown a particular evidence for something, and the religion holds something else. So how do you deal with it? How do you deal with this? Okay, I'll give you some ideas, and maybe some of you can tell me how you yourselves look at it. First of all, the opposite of having faith is not being the opposite of faith is not reason. The opposite of faith is no faith. In other words, if we take science to mean somebody who uses reason to come up to his conclusions, and a religious person uses faith to come up to his conclusions, okay? But the opposite of having faith doesn't mean that you don't use reason, okay? And the opposite is true too. The opposite of reason is not faith. In other words, there are a lot of people who aren't religious and they don't make much sense in things that they do in their lives. What's the message here? The message here is that religion and reason, or religion and science, aren't opposite. How we deal with it, I'll give you a couple of suggestions, and maybe you have some other ideas, okay? One way of looking at it is that science works with facts and religion works with faith, belief. What does that mean? God, you can argue, made the world the way he made the world. And in the world, this is what a person of faith might say, in the world he set up rules for us to figure out, to use, to manipulate. That's how we live our lives, okay? Why he made it this way, that's rabbis have answers. Why it looks like this and why it looks sometimes different. There's something called in Hebrew daf yomi. Daf yomi is every day you learn a page of the Talmud. And this morning I only learn it once a week. So, even though it's called a daily, I do it once a week with a friend who does it every day. He's serious, I'm less serious. And he does it, so we did it today. And today's was talking about if the placenta comes out after the birth, does that mean there was a twin? Now, the friend I learned with, he's a physician, and he said, it makes no sense what the Talmud is saying. In other words, the fact that there's a placenta coming 3 days after the birth, he says, and he's not sure that's possible, but even if it is, it doesn't mean there was a twin that melted. That's what the Talmud says, okay? The twin disappeared, okay? That's why the placenta came out 3 days. Doesn't matter. All I'm trying to say is that the Talmud has its reasoning, has its way of approaching things. God set the world up so man can understand at a certain level. Man does not understand how God works. We think, sometimes we do, but the famous thing, good people often wind up bad in terms of their lives are difficult, and sometimes what we think are bad people, they have the greatest lives, right? They're rich, they're smiling, etc., but they're not religious, they're not good. Anyway, right, well, how does that work? We don't know how God works. But a person can be in the laboratory and work with the rules of science and still say, God works in his way. I don't understand it often. Often we don't understand. So the faith person can say, and one nice way of looking at it, which I like very much, is, does God come down to man or does man come up to God? And the answer, I think, is God comes down to man. Man doesn't come up to God. Man has no idea, in so many cases, why there are holocausts, why innocent people are shot, why good people get sick. We don't understand. We don't understand. That's up there. But down here, God comes and says, listen, this is how I want the world to work. This is gravity works in a certain way, right? And we know antibiotics work in a certain way, etc., etc. God set the world up. So it is possible to be religious and have reason to be a scientist. Unfortunately, as I quoted the statistic, most scientists do not believe in a God, are atheists. They're not religious, they're atheists. And but it's possible. And the bottom line, which Tajfel says also, we can belong to many groups. We can belong to a Jewish group. We can belong to people who do good things for others. And that could be Jews, Catholics, Protestants, could be anybody, right? We belong to that group who donates kidneys. That's the one. I spent a weekend with the kidney donors because I studied them. So the person in charge invited me for the whole weekend to be with them. And it was amazing. I just want to say one interesting thing about it. I was wrong on one major issue on the kidney donors. I thought that women who do more, studies have shown, I'll tell you a famous study in a minute on that, women do more kind acts to others than men. However, nearly 80% of kidney donors are men. I had hypothesized, and I spoke to some of the women, and I said, oh, it's interesting, why did you decide to do this? And the issue that came up is most of these women are between 20 and 40, and I guess it's a sensitive age, maybe for having children, whatever, that they don't want to scar their bodies. By the way, today, doing kidney surgery, removing the kidney is nearly without a blemish. You hardly see what was done. It's amazing. It's amazing. The study I wanted to quote about men and women, famous study done at Princeton. Okay, Princeton University. I tell my class, Princeton and Harvard. You know, there's like a few colleges that go together. Princeton, Harvard, Bar-Ilan. I try to put them in the same breath. Famous study done at Princeton between two faculty members. They worked this out together. Listen to this. The class goes from 12 to 1:30, okay, and the next class begins at 2. And they worked this out, the two of them, to do this following psychology research. The 12 o'clock class teacher kept them late, okay? And the class knew that the teacher who teaches at 2 penalizes you if you come late, okay? What did the psychologists do? You know, psychologists like to do this type of thing. They had a person make believe he had fallen on the ground between the two classes, okay? And the students are running out from the first class. Everyone with me? They're running out to go to the second class because they don't want to be late, so they're running, okay? The women, with the vast majority of women at least talked to the man on the floor, and the vast majority of men, 81% of the men, 81% of the men went right by the guy, and they didn't want to lose points from their mark, you know. Us men understand that. That's so important not to lose any points, right? So women often, in studies, it's very well known, women are much more likely to help, to loving kindness, whatever words we like to use, chesed, the word we use in Hebrew. So you belong to different groups. Gender, nowadays in the States and in the Western world, gender is no longer sometimes a group. Everybody is men, women, previous women. We're all one group. But there is still, I think, at least in the Jewish world and the religious world, I think there's still difference between men and women. In last point, in Google Scholar, that's how you find articles on a particular topic. If you look up the word gender differences from 2018 to 2009, from 2018 to 2019, 28,000 articles. So, you know, there are still gender differences, but a lot of people think there is no more gender differences. Men and women are exactly equal. I don't think it's wrong to say. I think in certain places, if you said it, they would be upset. But I think this group would accept it. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Please, your comments.
Not before that, tell a story. Into your story. There used to be about divided societies. One society was Northern Ireland. You know, to explain to my students how Northern Ireland works. So I told them the story of my colleague of mine, his father, who was British, came to Northern Ireland, and at the checkpoint they asked him, "Are you Catholic or are you Protestant?" And he said, "No, I'm Jewish. Are you Catholic Jewish or are you Protestant?"
You gotta belong.
Reform or
Makes
Orthodox?
Yes.
I'm wondering,
Yes.
so you gave us this example of the refrigerator in the car.
Yes.
And you said the men tend to use a coercive
Correct.
argument and the women a persuasive
Yes.
argument. But then you said we tend to use persuasive arguments within group and
Correct.
coercive arguments without group.
Right.
Does that mean men regard women, including their wives, as out group?
You're asking a question that Raven at UCLA. Raven is really a famous psychologist, Bert Raven. If you look him up, you'll see. And that's one of the questions he wanted to know. He says, is a man see himself as part of men? Okay?
Yes, right.
Or women see themselves as part of humankind? And again, if you take the charity example, the women will help men and women. By the way, in a study of OCB, which I mentioned, helping in organizations, men love to help women in organizations, okay? Women do not help women as much, okay? The most help is man to woman, okay? For different reasons, why women don't help each other as readily. Here's an area where women could maybe improve a little. One of the reasons is women are more competitive at work with each other, you know? All sorts of studies on that area too. But your question is Bert Raven's question, is man see woman as another group, and women see everybody as, that's what it seems like from the research. He asked the question, it's not a real answer. Hopefully, men who are married or men who have a female partner or male partner, whatever they have, think of their partner as part of their group. It's a shame, but that's what they found. Yes?
I'm sorry, when was the study?
Which one?
The Raven study? What year was it
Raven
done?
studies were done in the late 80s, early 90s.
Has it subsequently been replicated? I'm just interested because it would seem like, given
yeah.
the sort of stereotypical gender norms of the 80s and 90s, and also the earning potential of the 80s and 90s, that perhaps
Things
men
have
were
changed.
earning more money and therefore felt more entitled to use a coercive position. It would just, I just think it would be
I think you're
interesting
making good.
to rerun
Bert's
that.
still around. He's like much older, but it's a good question. Have things changed? You can argue that on many areas on gender differences, very much so.
My second
Yeah,
My second
sure.
question was, what if, sort of, how do multiple group identities work together? Because, you know, in some of the follow-ups on Tajfel, people talked about sort of cross-cutting cleavages between in-groups and
Right.
out-group versus reinforcing cleavages. So,
Right. Right.
sort of to what degree are there certain...
Okay, look. Tajfel argued that we have our social identity is made up of many groups. Now, sometimes, okay, and maybe that's why I brought in religion and science, they may conflict. Forget about religion and science for a second, just to follow your train of thought. You could belong to, I don't know, let's say Israel, and believe in certain things. You live in Israel, you're an Israeli, and you believe in certain things. But then you also believe in other things that have that may conflict with your beliefs of Israel. You know, a controversial thing is, I don't know if you're aware that the President of the United States, yes, Pompeo, the Secretary of State, the other day announced that the occupied territories are no longer illegal.
The settlements.
The settlements, right. The settlements are in the territory, right. They're no longer illegal. So could you be an Israeli, and there are like that, who believe that the settlements are illegal? It doesn't make you a bad Israeli. One may not agree with them, but you're an Israeli, and it's all within Israeli territory. But you feel that the Palestinians deserve their land. Okay, I don't want to get into politics, but I'm just saying we make all the time, we make decisions between the different groups we belong to, and I would say much of the time we live with it. It's sometimes the conflict comes up, and I am sure the conflict with religion and science is one that has a big effect on young people growing up in religious homes. That's my feeling. They go to university, and some of you, I know several stories like this. They go to university, they come from a home that was a believing home, faith, and in the university you hear different ideas, and it's hard to reconcile, and you may leave that group, the religious group, and move on into the science group, you know. That's not an uncommon thing.
By the way, Google translated chesed to grace.
Grace.
כן,
Okay.
אבל זה לא בהקשר הדתי.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
The statistics, if you
Yeah.
science and religion, it seems to be it's impossible. You said that 92% of people in America describe themselves as non-atheists, or people that with faith, right? You said only 8% describe themselves as atheists.
Only 8% say they're atheists.
Okay, and you said that 64%.
Among scientists, 64%.
So according to that, scientists are less than 12% of the population.
Right.
I mean, can't be.
Why?
I think there are many more of them.
I don't understand what you're saying. No.
According as you
You
cannot
take
have more
all
than-
scientists.
But scientists are people.
Let's say there are 1,000 scientists. So 640 of them are not religious.
And how- yes,
And
but
now if
according
you
to
take all of America, you have 250 million people.
Yes, but you-
and 6% of them are not religious.
But,
Are
but,
not.
but many, you have many more scientists than 10% of the population.
I don't know. Even if you do, so what?
So then it's basically impossible. If you have more than 10% scientists,
Yeah.
then it's impossible.
No,
because
it's not true. No, it's not true. You can have the group of scientists, you can have 20 scientists, and you can have a million scientists.
If you have million scientists,
Yes.
it will not work.
Why not?
Because there are more than 6% of the population.
No, a million is 640,000. What is 640,000 of 250 million? Is 640 of 250 million. If it's 6 million, it's 10%, and 250 million is 1/40th of that. What if it would be even less? No, it's possible. Even if you had a million scientists, 60.
How do you define science?
Okay.
Well, I mean, everything
It doesn't matter. That's a different question. But you can have it within the group. There are 250 million Americans, right? And then you can have 6% being more, 300 million. So let's say 300 million. So, yeah,
Members of the National Academy.
maybe.
They don't accept people that are